Good morning, good afternoon, a warm welcome to everyone. I'm David Parker and I work for Imagen. We're a cloud-based video asset management platform with a large number of sports clients who use our technology for storing, managing and distributing media content to rights holders, broadcasters and consumers. Today's panel session is on the topic of fan engagement. In the last 12 months, we've all witnessed many creative ways in which sports industry has gone to keep their fans and the wider audience engaged with their programs. Major League Baseball and NFL teams allowed fans to purchase cardboard cutouts of themselves to be placed in the stadium. Formula One launched the F1 Esports Virtual Grand Prix series and achieved 22 million views on YouTube alone. NBA partnered with Microsoft Teams to enable 300 fans to cheer their team on inside the NBA bubble using Together mode. Sports federations and production houses are digging deep into content archives to produce some truly remarkable documentaries in the absence of live events. For example, The Last Dance, which chronicled the rise of the Chicago Bulls from the 1990s, led by Michael Jordan. That had an audience viewership of 6 million per episode. Joining me today, special thanks to our panelists. Firstly, Melissa Soobratty, Senior Media Director at World Table Tennis. Melissa, I'd be grateful if you'd introduce yourself to our audience today.
Hi, I'm Melissa. I've been recently appointed as the Senior Media Director at World Table Tennis, and my remit is basically to oversee the entire media rights strategy. That includes everything from commercial rights, but also through to production and our social and digital media strategy, with the view to increase table tennis and the following internationally.
Thank you, Melissa. Second up, Tom Barnes, VP IMG Replay. Tom, a few words from you by way of introduction.
Yes, thank you, David. Excuse me. Yes, Tom Barnes, been at IMG for over 16 years now. We're part of IMG Media. Our specialist area is managing and storing and marketing and selling video archive content, and we represent numerous sports rights holders around the world. And my team is doing that very well this year.
Super. Thank you both. I'm pleased to say both WTT and IMG are long-standing customers of Imagen. I'm delighted to have you on our panel session today. Additionally, we have Roxanne Kingsman, our Head of Comms, who will be leading the Q&A at the end. We're going to be hearing from Melissa and Tom on a range of topics around fan engagement. How rights holders are going the extra distance to keep fans engaged, how user-generated content and social media is being used to fill content gaps, how WTT is bringing its sport to a wider global audience, and the key learnings that have been carried forward now that sports across the world are coming back into play. So let's start by talking about how technology has enabled sports and sports broadcasters to reach fans during the pandemic. We know that organizations are leaning on archive content to feed demand. The Last Dance, as I mentioned, had an average of 6 million viewers across each of the 10 episodes. Additionally, we're seeing more services introduced that give fans options on how to view games, be it via YouTube, pay-per-view, and through household subscription services such as Amazon Prime. So, Melissa, how has WTT been using archived content in the period of no live events?
Well, it was actually really interesting. A week before lockdown, we had literally just finished ingesting over 9,000 hours of ITTF content onto Imagen. And as soon as lockdown happened, what we decided to do was utilize that archive, and we came up with a series called Smashbacks. So for each event that was cancelled, we had a Smashback week. And a Smashback week was basically the best moments of that event. So Korea, China, Japan, they were the first opens that were cancelled. So for the Korea Open, we had the best moments of that Open going all the way back to 1996 with the ITTF Pro Tour. So there would be one full match per day for social media. And then we continued with all of this until we got to our restart events in China. We also came up with other initiatives such as short clips, who did it best. And this was blocks, hand switch shots around the nets, and we had 5 different players for each shot. So a lot of the content was unseen footage to our audience, and therefore it was very fresh. And so we had a lot of archive footage, and we even had archive weeks, which went back to 1995, and we carved out 5 years per week of events to show. And then there were 14 match highlights on YouTube per week. And then we also showed 2 full matches on Facebook. And that brought us all the way up to November, when we were able to restart with our China bubble.
Fantastic. Sounds like you're really ahead of the game there. For the first event in Macau, was there the option of live streaming for fans who couldn't attend themselves?
Well, WTT Macau was a test event. So during this lockdown period, that was our opportunity to work out how to build WTT, which is the commercial vehicle of ITTF, and it's our opportunity to grow the sport commercially and also more internationally. So there was a lot of planning for that. And then for WTT Macau, we used it as an opportunity to test lots of different experiments and innovations ahead of us launching the series next year.
Brilliant. So you're all set?
Well, getting there, let's put it that way.
Okay, well, that's great to hear, and I look forward to viewing that when it airs. Tom, has IMG Replay been able to maintain smooth operations throughout the pandemic?
Thankfully, yes. And we've, touching on sort of Melissa's point there about having the archive digitized, logged, available on a centralized platform, has enabled rights holders to service broadcasters and their stakeholders with content. It's really interesting that, you know, the timing of what Melissa alluded to, and other rights holders that we've been speaking to for years, who perhaps haven't done that investment and haven't made that, started that journey, are perhaps kicking themselves because of what's happened since March. So we, as a department, IMG Replay, thankfully have been able to operate successfully this year, and technology, the use of Imagen's platform, the cloud services that we're using, has enabled that. So yeah, it's if we were still working on tapes, and tapes were in warehouses and those were closed, this wouldn't be happening, or this year wouldn't have worked so well for us.
So Tom, you've got a great example where archive content's being used to promote the brand.
Yeah, thanks, David. So Nike is one of our key customers, headquartered over in Oregon, and their advertising agency, Wimbledon Recreate, we work with very closely. This year, they've created numerous commercials that have been released, and we've got a good example here called "You Can't Stop Sport." It's a 90-second commercial. It took extensive amount of researching. There's over 4,000 sports clips that were researched. And you can see when you watch the video shortly that it's split screen. So you'll see an athlete on the left, an athlete on the right, etc. And it's made to look as one. So the 36 split screen moments, and IMG licensed 8 of our federation's content into this commercial. Hugely successful for Nike, just under 60 million views, and another proud example of what we've worked on this year. And, you know, it's a good example as well that, you know, it's been business as usual for IMG Replay this year. This was created since lockdown. So I think we're going to play the advert now, and you can see the commercial.
We're never alone. And that is our strength. Because when we're doubted, we'll play as one. When we're held back, we'll go farther and harder. If we're not taken seriously, we'll prove that wrong. And if we don't fit the sport, we'll change the sport. We know things won't always go our way.
and the world's sporting events are postponed or cancelled.
But whatever it is, we'll find a way. And when things aren't fair, we'll come together for change.
We have a responsibility
to make this world a better place.
And no matter how bad it gets, we will always come back stronger. Because nothing can stop what we can do together.
Okay, good. So equally ahead of the game there. And I think in general, technology is bridging the gap between, content producers and the consumers, the fans at the end.
Yeah, very much so. We're all not only are we working in this industry, we're also sports fans and viewers ourselves. And I'm sure over the last 6 to 9 months, our individual viewing habits have changed at home as well. Fundamentally because there hasn't been for a period of time live sport. So, we've either watched archive sport or perhaps entertainment. So, everyone has had to adapt to what's happened in the world. Thankfully, live sport is now, more and more commonplace, and we just hope that the fans can get back into the stadiums and, to go and watch table tennis and all the other sports as well very quickly. Absolutely.
And I think that we're seeing that come back. But I think equally, during the pandemic, we've seen user-generated content come into play. It's become a mainstay for many organisations. Increasingly, live sport viewing experience is no longer just about the game itself, but fan engagement before, during and after the event, creating new opportunities for broadcasters. So Tom, following on, have you seen good examples of organisations that have amplified the use of UGC to fill the gap in the absence of live events?
Yeah, Wimbledon is one of our rights holders that IMG has had a relationship with for over 50 years, and we sell their archive. So, the Wimbledon, unfortunately, the championships last year in July were cancelled. They weren't postponed, they were cancelled. So there was a 2-week window where the world normally tunes into SW19 to watch the tennis, and there was no tennis. So Alex Willis and her marketing team at Wimbledon created a very successful online campaign, Wimbledon Recreated, and they asked basically fans around the world, which there's millions, to recreate their own version of Wimbledon in their garden, and created, and the fans were asked to send those UGC videos in into Wimbledon, and they created or curated a best of view, which I think we're going to show shortly. But that just shows how a rights holder engaged with their audience, even though there wasn't a 2-week event. Wimbledon's very unique. It only has a 2-week window every year. Some sports run a 9-10 months season, and Wimbledon didn't. So that's probably the best example I can share.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, as you mentioned, we've got a clip of what you're referring to there, that initiative. I think we can see that now.
Well, a very warm welcome to Wimbledon and the All England Club, and to all those from around the world as we get ready for these great championships. The final preparations have been made, every care taken to get the courts ready for the defending champion to take that famous walk and to hear the rising noise of the crowd, the welcome to centre court. Every player knows this feeling, the excitement, the nervous anticipation at the match ahead. The net is up, the warm-up complete, the balls are new, and a big day too for the officials and the ball boys and girls as we get ready to play. Even in this historic setting, things move on, and a glimpse of the future here with the advance of equipment technology. Those may not conform to regulations, something for the umpire to keep an eye on, who also has to keep the best of order with tension running high.
Come on, Tim.
Even with those watching. But for everyone, it is that time of tradition, sunshine and strawberries and cream everywhere you look, whoever you might be. And it is time for tennis. Whatever it takes, all sorts of technique on show, but from centre court to the very outside courts. The play is of the highest standard, and we all know that feeling when the last ball is struck and the final call is made. Congratulations and commiserations at the net, and then off to celebrate, perhaps heading to find family and share the moment with them. A nice touch, a few souvenirs offered to the crowd, and always time for that familiar ritual after becoming champion and dreaming of when we'll do it all once again.
Brilliant. Well, great example. I hope everybody enjoyed watching that as much as I did. Melissa, do you see interest from athletes in your arena producing their own content? And actually, how do you see UGC being used across sport in general?
Well, there was definitely an increase from our athletes in creating their own content. We had our Mexican player, Marcos Madrid, create a tutorial on how to make bubble tea, something he'd learnt in his time when he was in China. Simon Gauzy, who we can see there, created his own YouTube channel. And then Hugo Calderano from Brazil uploaded a lot of training video content. And so we definitely saw an increase also in viewership by the fans to get access to their players during lockdown.
Okay, fantastic. So, you know, during the pandemic, it definitely has unveiled new opportunities. You know, so I'd like to just continue that a bit more and talk to you about, you know, how table tennis specifically has been able to reach a wider audience, you know, despite the obvious social distancing, you know, restrictions that have been in place.
I think, as I mentioned, we utilized content, archive content that hasn't seen the light of day for a really long time. So this gave an opportunity for the younger fans who'd never seen these tournaments get to watch some of the stars from the past. What we are also doing is trying to see how we can grow the sport and underline the fact that it is a sport that can be played anywhere. So I've got a little something to show you. This is a kit that we put together and we're going to test out next year. It is a ready-to-play kit. So included is a pull-out net that you can attach anywhere. Of course, we have the, I can just get it out here, a WTT branded ball. And then it also comes with 2 rackets. So this really underlines the fact that table tennis is a sport that can be played anywhere. It's really easy, and it's a very good kit to travel around with once everyone can travel again.
Fantastic. I think that's a really neat initiative there, and hopefully it is getting people playing more table tennis regardless of where they are. So talk to me about how athletes themselves have been engaging with fans. Have you seen an uptake in followers on individual social media channels?
We've definitely seen an update in followers, and part of our preparation for WTT Macau, we ran a competition to have the fans be judged by the players. So really it was trying to get the fans to show their best shots of skills and to have our players judge them. So we had Adriano Ruiz from Puerto Rico and Ma Long from China judge the competitions and also see which was the best shot. And that was a really nice player-fan interaction moment. Number one, for fans to be heard. Number two, also getting more of an emotional access to the players, because normally they're so focused on the competitions, you don't really get a chance to see that side. And part of our mission next year is to bring fans closer to the players and also demystify the players, what's behind, you know, their game face, and, you know, make them a lot more accessible as people, not just players.
You should watch it so you understand what I'm saying.
Hello, 我是中国的马龙.
Hi, I'm Adriana Diaz, and this is Impress the Players. Let's see. I like the ponytail. Oh, that's so funny.
经验指数，我给7吧，7分。纯技术第2个球，一点没有幸运。
So the wow factor in this shot, I would give it an 8. I like his serve. Oh, yeah. That was good. Oh, he's giving a handshake. That was funny.
第2个球我觉得经验指数8分，8颗星，然后也是技术更多一点。
So the wow factor, I'll give it a 7. It was okay. I really like it. Let's see now. That's classic. I really like that one.
第3个球，我觉得经验指数10分，然后这个技术的同时也有一定运气。
This always amazes me, you know, when they make it on their back with their hand. That's pretty good. The wow factor on this one is number 10. Like I have really tried this one before and I could like never make it. So that was pretty impressive. I really liked it.
第3个球我觉得最漂亮，做得好，加油。
So number 3, you're the winner. Well done.
Okay, fantastic. Tom, back to broadcasters. How have they been appealing to a wider audience?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, during the initial lockdown when there was no live sport, that was the initial challenge. You know, they had people paying subscriptions or free to air, and they needed to keep their output. They had the channels, so that was where the creative, whether they're doing repeats or they're using archive content, the broadcasters have had to stay relevant and had to keep the audience engaged. That's hard because, you know, they're paying for a live service and that live service isn't there. So, you know, I'm sure it hasn't been easy and there's different, you know, winners and losers with the broadcasters around the world. But I think if they've got through that period and now live sport is back, hopefully they haven't lost too many subscriptions and, you know, they can retain their customer base.
No, thank you. Question for both of you, really. What activities do you feel that have been either accelerated or halted, in fact, due to events this year? And I will put that to Melissa first.
Thanks, David. Well, obviously with lockdown, we had to cancel our events, but then we got an opportunity to bring back international table tennis. So we were able to plan 3 key events for us, the Women's World Champs, the Men's World Champs, and then we had another championship in China. And then straight after that, we were able to trial the first WTT showcase, which was called WTT Macau, based in Macau. And that gave us an opportunity to test and try a lot of innovations in advance for the series launch next year.
Okay. Thank you. Really great insight there. You know, I'd now finally like to talk about key lessons from the pandemic. And I'll put this to Tom. You know, what would you say have been the key learnings for sports broadcasters and right holders in the last 12 months?
Well, yeah, very big and broad question. I think if everyone could turn back time, they'd all wish they had insurance that insured them for a pandemic. Now, there's only a handful of examples, I believe, around the world who've actually, you know, received insurance payouts for cancelled events. And unfortunately, you know, that isn't going to happen going forward. So those lucky enough to receive an insurance payout this year, I don't believe anyone will be able to be insured for pandemics going forward because every rights holder will be trying to do it and the premiums will just be unworkable. So that's one. And, you know, congratulations to those rights holders who did get insurance in place because that's a lifeline to them. And that's, I think, secondly, I think, since March, or certainly in the UK perspective, I'm talking from here because lockdowns are varied around the world. I think, individual companies, rights holders, broadcasters, we've all had to change how we fundamentally work day to day. We're all sat on this panel at home. That was pretty much unheard of, in January this year. And, that has changed. It's proven, I think, technology, going back to one of the initial questions, that, with amazing technology, we can operate remotely. And, it's going to be interesting to see what changes when, the vaccine's there and the world returns, how that shift happens. So I know there's some broad answers there to your question, but, it's a moving feast at the moment, David.
Okay, thank you. Absolutely, it is. Back to WTT. Do you think fans are now going to expect more content from outside of the tournaments as a general theme going forward?
Well, I think, the fact that we were able to utilize the archive, it was a really big lesson for us how we shouldn't be so reliant on live match content, especially when there's no live matches taking place. And next year, as part of our bid to grow awareness of the sport, we will be launching a mobile app and a website. So this gives us an opportunity to create more original content. And I think as we try and get people to not just understand the sport of table tennis, but also get to know our players better, it gives us an opportunity to try different things outside of the traditional sports content model.
Okay, so you're still thinking about new ways to drum up interest in the sport?
Yes, I mean, it's traditionally seen as an Asian sport, but as mentioned earlier on, we've got players from other countries. And I think there are definitely interesting ways in terms of how to do tutorials, for example, and other content, or perhaps taking players when you see some of the other sports available like FIBA, etc., how they utilize their players, whether they've got hype music list utilizing Spotify and you hear what that player's favorite song is to prepare. There are so many different ways that we can look to branch the sport outside of sport and into other fields.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that insight with both Melissa and Tom. I'm now going to turn over to Roxanne Kingsman, who has gathered additional questions from the audience. Over to you, Roxanne.
Thanks, David. There's been some really interesting points raised, and I think we've heard about some fantastic opportunities from innovation, which has been really refreshing to hear this year, especially. But what has been the biggest overarching challenge when it comes to creating new content for your fans? And this is a question specifically for Melissa.
I think as we try and grow the sport, it's understanding what fans want, and what we're trying to build is a two-way conversation, which perhaps hadn't been done enough for various reasons. So we see with the coming of WTT, it's an opportunity to develop things in a way that haven't been done before. I don't know whether you got a chance to catch WTT Macau, but certainly the presentation was very, very different from your traditional table tennis event. It was a mixture of entertainment, but also sport, because again, we're trying to build that excitement. So in the coming weeks, we will be asking for feedback on some of the things that we trialed at WTT Macau. I know some things were a little divisive, such as the change of the camera angles, etc. So this is a great opportunity for us to learn from the fans, to see how we can grow and develop things, but also show that we are listening to them moving forward as we try and build that better product for next year.
Perfect. That actually segues quite nicely to a question to both yourself and Tom. There's obviously been a kind of a push to try new things, and I think perhaps it sounds like there's been a few areas of innovation that have already been on the table before this pandemic, so to speak. So with this push to innovate and create and try new things, has there been anything that you both feel that you would continue to do in a post-pandemic time of sports events?
Do you want me to go first?
Why not?
Yeah, I think one of the key things that we're working on at the moment, and this is going to evolve over the next 12 months and onwards, is the AI logging element. So, a live sporting event can happen anywhere around the world at the moment, and we can get our hands easily and quickly on the media. The time-consuming bit is logging that media, so that when it arrives on a platform, whether it's IMG Replay or worldtabletennisarchive.com, you want the user to be able to find that content within that piece of video quickly and easily. So currently, most logging is done by humans, and there's some very credible AI companies out there at the moment that we're talking to. And if that technology can replace the human logging and improve it quicker, cheaper, better, then we are going to see some, basically the content and the media being able to get onto platforms far quicker and, arguably service stakeholders better and potentially increase sales. So that, for me, is a really exciting development that's going to come. And I really hope that, Imagen, we're working closely with Imagen, because whoever IMG partners with in this AI space has to be able to seamlessly integrate with Imagen as well.
So there's been quite a push to rely on new technologies, essentially, in order to kind of marry the excitement and need and demand for content from your audience, with the production capacity as well, it sounds like. Very
much so, yeah. They're intertwined, and the dream scenario is if a live event finishes, the recording stops, that you get that media, and that the AI logs that media as quickly as far as after the whistle finishes, effectively, and that media is then accessible and can be used. So that's the dream, and we're on that journey now, and I'm sure it will come. I just don't know when.
So the tech needs to be as fast and agile as your athletes, then.
Yes, yeah, good analogy.
So I don't know if you had anything to add to that, Melissa. It sounded like you had something to reference to that question before I moved on.
Yeah, I mean, for us, like I mentioned, at WTT Macau, we tested a lot of things. AI was something that we tested in the background. I think, again, in terms of demystifying that sport and making it more accessible, because it is such a fast-moving sport. I think for next year, we will hopefully be able to see that AI on screen, looking at key stats as well. I mean, every sports fan loves a stat, as well as knowing how fast the ball, was traveling at, where it landed, should it have been in, was it very close, etc. So this is something that we haven't done before, that we would like to bring to the sport, and elevate our competitions to the same levels as a lot of sports out there, such as cricket and tennis, that use the likes of Hawkeye, etc., to really add to the drama of the game.
It's great that you've referenced the ability to provide really detailed insights and stats faster to your fans. It's interesting, given the rise of esports as well. There's definitely a gamification of online consumption itself that we're seeing as a trend. And it just seems to have increased this appetite for content and information faster than ever. But with this competition for attention online, is there now a second challenge to keep your fans engaged within the same hub? How are you overcoming that?
Oh, well, it's a little early for us because we're just launching our event. But we have realized that we can't just rely on match content. And part of our strategy and plan next year is how to serve our audiences. So first of all, we have the international audience, And then we have the Chinese audience. So when we look at social media, for example, the content that we put out is very different across the two platforms. What will, work for a Chinese platform won't necessarily work for an international platform. We did also try testing live streaming across a number of methods, and this is something that we will continue to test. One platform didn't work so well because it wasn't able to geo-block, and in the first instance where we had broadcast deals, we didn't want to dilute those numbers because we really wanted to review how well the sport did on that channel without other factors to consider. So again, as we move to next year and developing all of our products, we really want to see how the mobile app performs and how the website performs and how the live streaming in untapped markets will perform. And then we will review whether there is enough demand for OTT.
It sounds like there's more opportunity as well for you to provide almost tailored content to fans within platforms like an app. So they're essentially getting an experience and becoming more and more involved in the sport as a bystander, even if they can't attend live events. So technology seems to have become that bridge that brings your audience into the game, so to speak.
For sure. When you think about, the other sports that we are fighting with for airtime, and table tennis is really at the beginning compared to the likes of the Premier League or the NBA, etc., in terms of getting guaranteed airtime. So this is our opportunity to use other platforms to give more content to our fans and the audience that wouldn't necessarily have a look in on traditional TV. So yes, we're taking a little bit of control in-house, so to speak, and creating a platform for content to consume additional information, get that insight into competitions, etc. And what we're hoping to deliver, that's currently in the planning, is an experience that they're not going to get anywhere else.
That's great. It's great to hear that there's now more opportunities to provide essentially fans what they want to see and something new as well.
I think, Roxanne, sorry, just to add on that as well, one example that I'm aware of, and I'm sure there's numerous others, so Formula One, during the lockdown, they were trying to keep their fans engaged, and they opted for the esports route, which between, I think it was March and May, and I'm sure, huge viewership on YouTube, and I'm sure that attracted potentially a new audience, younger perhaps audience, because the young millennials do love watching computer games and playing computer games, and that is the Formula One drivers driving from their home, racing each other on circuits around the world. So that's probably another good example that I can share. And as I said, I'm sure other rights holders did other things in the esports area, but the Formula One is a good one.
That's really interesting, and it leads quite nicely on to another question that we've received, which is really about how the younger generation of sports fans are used to consuming online. They're used to seeing their favourite influencers beyond the world of sports on channels that you're now housing new content on. But with athletes having to take on a second role as social media influencers, whether it's making bubble tea tutorials like Melissa mentioned, or taking up a new role as a commentator that we saw in your Wimbledon video, which I think we've all really enjoyed, at least here in the UK. What would you say is your favourite example of athlete-led content that you've seen personally?
Oh, okay. This isn't technically an athlete, but I have to say, I have loved Andrew Cotter's commentary on his dogs, Mabel and Olive. It's been fantastic. And I loved how he utilized his commentary skills for something as normal as a walk to the pond and turning it into a complete competition. I thought that was brilliant.
I thought that was a great example of how it shows that if you're obsessed with sports, you find a way to do it anywhere, anyhow. I think this is what essentially we've covered in today's panel, that passion and the need to bring it everywhere else. And interestingly about new audiences, we were reading as well that Andy, his Twitter following from this went viral, and he said there was a certain percentage of his Twitter followers who just followed for the dogs. They weren't sports fans at all. So it just plays to your point that there's just whole new ways to engage new people. That summarizes most of the questions that we covered. But was there anything else that you feel like we haven't covered today that you felt is worth mentioning? And this is a question to both of you.
No, I just think it's been a very hard year for everyone in many respects. And I think, you know, we're lucky that things are changing, improving, and sports coming back. We're all working the industry, we're all fans. And, you know, hopefully at some point in 2020, there will be some normality, and we're looking forward to that. But yeah, thank you for inviting us to join the panel. Yeah, it's been very enjoyable.
Thank you. Back over to David.
Thank you very much, Roxanne. You know, just extending my thanks to both Melissa and Tom for joining us today. I hope the audience have found it interesting and informative, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Many thanks.